Hey guys, if you're new here, my name's Sergio Lopez. I'm working primarily in oil and gouache right now, and so I just put out a recent video that talked about my technique of using wet on wet for softer edges in gouache. And so I got a couple of questions from people who watched that video, but one in particular was very thorough and really had a lot of questions to ask me. So I went ahead and used this opportunity to not only answer her specifically, but also gave me an opportunity to share with all of my subscribers here. And I'm just going to go ahead and share with you that video right now. Hey, Patty. So I thought that I would create this video so that I can show you easier what I'm talking about here instead of having to type it out and send you pictures and all that. So I'll just answer your questions from your email one by one here. First thing you asked me is it looks like these rely on foundations of watercolor in terms of how to layer. I haven't studied watercolor, but unlike oil, it appears you go light to dark, not dark to light. Not necessarily. That's one of the advantages of gouache is that you don't have to go light to dark. So I start light to dark even with oils, really. A lot of times, if I'm starting to block things in, I start things with sort of I wouldn't say light as in like the lightest I can go, but more of a kind of mid value color and value for my initial shapes that I establish. So that's maybe what I was doing in the video. Well, at least I know I was thinking in that way. But you can start as dark or as light as you want, and then just keep building up layers. That's one of the nice things about gouache, and I hope that came through in the video. A couple of other things you wanted me to elaborate on. What brushes do you use for wet on wet? Unlike opaque gouache, which is more tiling with flats, wet on wet and wet on dry requires a softer edge blending and layering on top of washes or layering of washes. Besides the quill mop, it looks like you use exclusively round brushes to soften wet on wet and wet on dry. All of the materials list I've seen of yours have been mostly geared towards opaque, mostly flats. I like Trical, as do you. It looks like you're using golden Taklon. Besides the cat's tongue and quill mop, what size round do you recommend? Okay, so some of that info is maybe a little bit, I guess, out of date as far as what I'm using these days. When I'm working wet on wet, I definitely choose different types of brushes than I normally would if I'm planning to work just, wet on dry or, semi wet on dry, like as is the usual process for working in gouache. But I just grabbed a handful of softer brushes that I have here that I'm using. So I probably wasn't using a lot of these when I created these materials lists because I don't think I had them yet. But I know for sure I had the quill mop. This is the Trikel. It's the I believe it's their Onyx, which is like a synthetic squirrel type of mop brush. So that's a really good one. That this one's my go-to. I think I used to have a smaller one, and I'm not sure what happened to it anymore. So I might need to pick up a new one. But yeah, some other ones here. This is an Onyx Bright. So that's flatter, but it's the same soft hair. So that works for grabbing more water when you dip it into your water containers, and then it will give you a bit more water per paint ratio, which is kind of what we're after when we're doing wet on wet. We want a little more water in the brush, which is counter to how I normally explain you should work with gouache, but we're doing slightly different techniques. So slightly different techniques call for different materials. This is just like, this is a Miller's Pseudo Squirrel Synthetic Round 12. This is, I think, the Cheap Joe's brand, but I think any synthetic squirrel will work. This is a number 12, so this is about maybe 3/8 inch in diameter to the actual brushes hairs. So there's that one. This is a brush I use a lot. This is a Trikel number 12 red sableette. I believe this is a synthetic sable, and I'm not sure if they're still making these brushes. This was actually in the oil brush section, but I like the hairs, and this is one that I use. It's a kind of an all-purpose round brush that I use in a lot of different ways, but it's also great for smaller passages of wet on wet. So I also would recommend that one. This is a U-Trek. It looks like 222 is the brush number, size 11 Sabeling. I don't know if this brush is still manufactured by U-Trek. I got this one as a student and I still have it and use it sometimes. It's not one I take out in the field usually because most of the time my quill mop will take care of any wet on wet that I'm doing on location. But this is just one I have in the studio for a little bit extra utility. So hope that answers that question. Next one is I started with Lena Rico. She meant Revo. 24 colors in my kit, but there are many I never use and would like to clean out and try a new palette. In your Sentient Academy, that's my old course that I created a few years ago. You didn't provide a printed list, but this is what I discerned when I froze the screen and blew it up. Hopefully you'll have a list with colors and brands sometime in the future. I do have one on my YouTube, or no, I think it's on my Instagram from a couple years ago, but I'll just go ahead and update it for you now. Have I evolved since then? I see 22 to 23 colors listed, but you have 24 wells. Or would you compare the list I made and share the 24 colors that lay out on yours? If starting fresh, would you reorganize the colors you have in your third row into a color wheel arrangement? Yeah, actually, I've done a lot since I created that course as far as my understanding and experience with color and gouache. So I actually do have a different palette arrangement in mind that I'm going to go through with my students in my upcoming course coming February 15th. So let's look at what it's in my palette right now, and we can just go through and maybe create a new list, and you don't have to screenshot my palette here. So let's start from the beginning. This is titanium white. I definitely would keep that around, and I recommend just about any brand for it. They're all pretty good. Any of like the bigger gouache brands. Holbein. This one I believe is Schminke, which is a pretty expensive brand, but you could get by with either Holbein, M. Graham, Schminke, any of those bigger brands like that. Winsor Newton makes a great white. So yeah, you don't have to be too brand loyal when it comes to the whites. Just make sure you get one that's actually pro quality. I gotten ones that turn like almost tan. That's just terrible. You don't want that. So stay away from like the student brands is all I'm saying. In here, I'm just going through an old tube of zinc white. So I don't necessarily recommend zinc white, but it has its uses. So that's what I'm using there. This is cadmium yellow. This is cadmium yellow light. This is a Schminke brand. The reason I kind of splurge on the cadmium yellows is because it's really hard to find a nice opaque yellow that does not get dominated by other colors that you're mixing with. So that's why I recommend getting the highest quality light yellow that you can if you're going to use one. Then we got yellow ochre. I'm using M. Graham right now. One of my favorite colors now is Jean Briant #1. This is Holbein. I believe Holbein is the only one that makes this color, but I really like it. It's like a warmer Naples yellow. So it's kind of like a peachy, like a light orange, basically, is what we're doing with that. This is, I believe, gamboge. Yeah, which I gotta have somewhere. Well, I know I have gamboge floating around here somewhere, but I'm also using permanent yellow deep, pretty interchangeable, Winsor Newton. I'm using cadmium orange by M. Graham. Well, this is cadmium scarlet that I'm using right now from Winsor Newton, but cadmium red light is totally fine to use. Also got alizarin right here. Played around with different violets. Right now, I just picked up quinacridone purple, which is a brand new Daniel Smith color. I haven't used it yet, but right now in here, I believe it's spectrum violet from Winsor Newton. Got ultramarine blue from M. Graham. We got aqua blue from Holbein, which is a tough color to replace, so I haven't done that yet. I just got a replacement for Holbein's turquoise green from Daniel Smith called Cobalt Teal Blue. I believe this should be pretty close to either of those colors. So yeah, it's a little darker, little cooler, skews more toward blue than green, but I think that should probably be a good replacement for both of those colors together, actually. We got Holbein's Leaf Green, which is this color right here. But if you want to try out some other colors, you're not like the biggest fan of Holbein, you could also try Linden Green, which is a different color, but it serves the same function on my palette as a leaf green would. We got also sap green, which is the next color there. Some of my neutrals, my colorful neutrals, I like using ash green, which is kind of a gray green, which we got there. This right now is Mgram's Viridian, but I actually prefer Winsor Newton. And right now I have this Windsor green, which is basically a phthalo green, but mixed with Viridian, I think it makes for a nice color that is more powerful and does a little bit more of what I want my green to do. So that's why I use that one. I have Payne's Gray, which is a great, more opaque dark than neutral tint. Daniel Smith actually just came out with a neutral tint gouache, and I didn't pick it up yet, but I will in the future once I'm done with my with my neutral tint watercolor. So lavender from Daniel Smith, which is sort of a light grayed down purple, which I find very useful in a lot of situations. It's great for reflected sky color. I use it for skies a lot of time too, actually, mixed with ultramarine. So yeah, a lot of different uses for this one. I have burnt sienna. You can go with Mgram if that's the cheapest option for you. So I started using, instead of burnt umber, I started using Van Dyke Brown because what I found in gouache, and this is not the case in oil, but I found that in gouache, burnt umber and burnt sienna look way too similar to each other, so they don't really justify having two separate colors that basically do the same thing. So I've been on the search for a darker brown that works as a nice dark. So I actually picked up sepia from Holbein recently, so I'm going to try that. But for now, I'm using Van Dyke Brown. I also picked up Daniel Smith's Van Dyke Brown, and we'll see if I like that even more. Got Brilliant Pink Holbein color. Don't go with normal, with just pink if you want your color to be more light fast. So that's why I went with this one. It's not as strong of a pink, but I think it fits in my color tendencies a bit better. This is a great color, gray number 2. It's very much an all-purpose sort of neutral color that can warm up cool colors and cool down warmer colors. And it works great for neutralizing and mixing colors for better harmony. So that's why I like to use it. And last but not least, here's my neutral tint watercolor. So I think that is my entire palette there. I'm always searching for new colors, especially if I find a brand I like. Daniel Smith is a brand new gouache company. They've been making watercolors for a long time. People swear by their watercolors, and they've expanded their line of gouache this year. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm looking forward to trying more of their colors. But I got so many to go through first here of my old colors. So, yeah, I believe that covers everything here. So, thank you for the question, and yeah, have a good one. I really appreciated this opportunity to share some of my knowledge with you guys. If you have more questions about gouache and want to get in contact with me, I left my email newsletter subscription link down in the comments below. So if you want to go ahead and ask me a question that maybe I could create a new video, such as this one that I just did here, go ahead and join my newsletter there and find a question for me to answer, and maybe I'll spotlight it here. Thanks.